What happens when the fairy tale shatters? For Olivia Croft, it happened with the sound of knuckles pulverizing drywall inches from her face. Her husband, Harrison Croft, the tech billionaire, lauded on magazine covers as a visionary, showed her his true face in their $50 million Park Avenue penthouse. He was a monster hiding in plain sight. Pregnant and terrified, Olivia knew that running wasn't enough. He would find her. He would control the narrative. So in the terrifying hours that followed, she made a choice. She wouldn't just be a victim. She would be the architect of his downfall, using the one weapon he never accounted for, the truth captured in crystal clear 4K video. The argument, like most of them, started over something laughably insignificant. A caterer for the upcoming Croft Foundation gala. Harrison wanted per se. Olivia, having heard whispers of their declining standards, suggested a private consultation with Daniel Hum's team from 11 Madison Park. To the outside world, it was the epitome of a 1% problem. To Olivia, sitting in their sprawling penthouse that overlooked Central Park like a kingdom, it was a test. A small, seemingly harmless push to see if she still had a voice. Harrison Croft didn't just occupy a room, he consumed it. At 42, he still possessed the restless, predatory energy that had helped him build his tech empire, Croft Enterprises, from a garage startup into a global behemoth. His public persona, curated with meticulous precision by a team of PR sharks, was that of a maverick genius, charming, slightly eccentric, and devoted to his beautiful younger wife. They were the golden couple, their life a meticulously art-directed fantasy for the masses. Daniel Hum Harrison scoffed, not looking up from his tablet, where stock tickers glowed a venomous green. "We're not running a vegan bake sale, Olivia. We need prestige. Per se is prestige. Harrison, I've heard." "You've heard." He mimicked his voice, dripping with condescension. He finally looked at her, his blue eyes, so often described in the press as piercingly intelligent, turning flat and cold. It was a look she had come to dread. "You hear things from your little coterie of socialites and lunch havers. I build things. I make decisions based on data, on brand power. Not gossip." Olivia felt the familiar heat rise in her cheeks. At 7 months pregnant, her body already felt like a foreign country, and his dismissiveness made her feel like an unwelcome tourist in her own home. She placed a hand on her swollen belly, a subconscious gesture of protection. "It's not gossip. It's a gala for our foundation. My name is on it, too." "I just want it to be perfect," she said, her voice softer than she intended. She hated how he made her small. "It will be perfect when you stop trying to meddle in things you don't understand." He stood up, the tablet clattering onto the glass coffee table. He began to pace a coast tiger in a bespoke Brioni suit. The penthouse, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and minimalist furniture, suddenly felt claustrophobic. "Do you have any idea the pressure I'm under? The Vanguard deal is on a knife's edge. We have a hostile takeover bid from Kenji Tanaka's firm in Tokyo. My entire legacy is on the line, and you're here debating canapés. This has nothing to do with canapés, and you know it," she retorted, a spark of her old self flaring up. Before she was Mrs. Croft, she was Olivia Davenport, a sharp art curator with a master's degree from Sotheby's. She had a mind, an opinion, a life. He had systematically dismantled it, piece by piece, cloaking the demolition in the guise of luxury and protection. "Oh, enlighten me then. What is this about?" he sneered, turning to face her fully. This was the precipice, the point where she could retreat, murmur an apology, and let him win. It was the easier path, the one she had taken 100 times before. But the life growing inside her made her brave. She couldn't let her child see her as a doormat. "It's about respect, Harrison," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "It's about you treating me like a partner, not a decorative accessory you acquired along with this apartment." The words hung in the air, thick and dangerous. Harrison's face, usually so controlled for the cameras, contorted. A vein pulsed in his temple. He had a slight twitch in his jaw that signaled the point of no return. It was twitching now. An accessory, he whispered, the sound more menacing than a shout. He took a step toward her, then another. She instinctively shrank back into the plush cushions of the Roche-Beaubois sofa. "I gave you everything. Everything. A life you couldn't even dream of. I plucked you from obscurity and put you on a throne. I had a life before you. I was happy. You were a nobody," he roared, the sound echoing off the cold glass and marble. He was standing over her now, his shadow engulfing her. His face was inches from hers, his breath hot with rage. She could smell the expensive scotch on it. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her defiance. This was it. The rage she had only seen in flashes in slammed doors and thrown phones was now directed squarely at her. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat of terror. She saw his eyes dart to the side, to the pristine white wall next to her head. What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. His arm, a piston of raw power, shot out. She flinched, a scream catching in her throat, convinced the blow was for her. The impact was like a gunshot. His fist, adorned with a simple but obscenely expensive platinum wedding band, smashed into the drywall. The plaster exploded inward, leaving a crater, a spiderweb of cracks, spreading out from the point of impact. Dust and debris rained down, some of it catching in her hair. Silence. A profound, deafening silence filled the room, broken only by Harrison's ragged breathing. He stared at his own fist, then at the hole, then at her. His eyes were wide, not with remorse, but with the wild, terrifying thrill of his own unleashed power. Olivia didn't move. She couldn't. Her entire world had just narrowed to the jagged hole in the wall, a violent, gaping wound in their perfect home, just a hand's breadth from her temple, from her baby. Slowly, Harrison pulled his hand back. His knuckles were raw and bleeding. He looked at her, and for a fleeting second she saw a flicker of something panic, maybe even fear of what he'd done. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a chilling calm. Now he said, his voice a low, steady threat. "The caterer is per se. We are not discussing this again. Clean yourself up. You look a mess." He turned and walked away, heading toward his office without a backward glance, leaving her alone with the ringing in her ears, the dust on her skin, and the terrifying, undeniable truth of the man she had married. For a long time she just sat there trembling. The fear was a physical thing, a cold liquid seeping into her bones. But as the minutes ticked by, something else began to crystallize beneath the terror. It was a cold, hard resolve. He thought the argument was over. He thought he had won. He was wrong. The argument wasn't over. The war had just begun. Her eyes flickered from the hole in the wall to a decorative ficus tree in the corner of the room. Tucked discreetly among its leaves, a tiny black lens was aimed directly at the sofa. The nanny cam she'd installed 2 months ago, after he'd accidentally broken her laptop during another argument. She had told herself it was for the baby's safety. But in her heart, she knew. She'd been waiting for this. The proof. The hours after the explosion of violence were a study in surreal normalcy. Harrison didn't emerge from his office. A quiet, almost ghostly maid appeared on schedule, her eyes deliberately avoiding the crater in the wall as she polished the already gleaming surfaces of the penthouse. Dinner was served for one a filet mignon. Olivia couldn't touch its bloody center, a sickening reminder of Harrison's knuckles. Olivia moved as if in a trance. She bathed the warm water, doing little to stop the tremors that racked her body. She slipped into a silk nightgown, the fabric feeling like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. Every sound, the hum of the city below, the whisper of the air conditioning, was magnified a potential threat. Her mind, however, was no longer frozen in fear. It was racing, working with a clarity she hadn't felt in years. She knew Harrison. She knew his patterns. Tomorrow, a team of contractors would appear silent and efficient, and the wall would be repaired, plastered, and repainted. By evening, it would be as if nothing had happened. He would likely buy her a gift, something extravagant like a Cartier bracelet or a rare first-edition book. A silent transactional apology that was more about erasing his guilt than expressing remorse. He would consider the matter closed. He would expect her to fall back in line. Not this time. Once the penthouse was cloaked in the deep silence of 2 a.m., Olivia slipped out of bed. She moved with a thief's stealth through the cavernous apartment she now saw as a prison. The moonlight streaming through the windows cast long, eerie shadows. She bypassed the living room, the hole in the wall a dark, accusing eye. Her destination was the small, unused nursery. She had fought him for this room. He had wanted it to be a secondary home gym. She had insisted on a space for their child, and in a rare moment of acquiescence he'd agreed. It was here, amongst the unassembled crib and boxes of organic baby clothes, that she had set up her secret command center. The nanny cam wasn't just a camera. It was a state-of-the-art security device sold under the guise of baby monitoring that streamed and saved encrypted footage to a secure offshore cloud server. Olivia had spent weeks researching it, paying for it with cash from a secret bank account she'd been siphoning small amounts into for the past year. She sat down at the small desk she'd placed in the corner, her fingers trembling as she typed in the long, complex password to access the server. The portal opened. There it was, a timeline of video files time-stamped and dated. She navigated to today's date, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She found the file labeled Living Room Cam 1745-1830. She clicked play. The scene unfolded in chilling high definition. The colors were vivid, the audio painfully clear. She watched the argument as if it were a movie starring a stranger. She saw herself looking small and vulnerable on the sofa. She saw Harrison, his swagger, his condescension, his escalating rage. She heard his voice a venomous hiss, then a roar. And then she saw it. The lunge, the blur of his arm, the explosion of plaster. She saw herself flinch, her body curling in on itself to protect her unborn child. She saw him stand there breathing heavily, a conqueror surveying his territory. She heard his final chilling words. "Clean yourself up." Watching it back was 1,000 times worse than living it. There was no ambiguity, no room for him to twist the narrative. It wasn't a he said, she said. It was a cold, hard, visual fact. He hadn't just punched a wall. He had performed an act of terror, a clear and calculated threat designed to obliterate her spirit, and he had done it to his pregnant wife. She downloaded the file, saving 3 separate copies, 2 encrypted USB drives. One for her, one for a safe deposit box, and one for what she was about to do. Her first call was to her sister. Sophie Davenport was a pragmatic ER doctor living in Boston, and the one person who had never been swayed by Harrison's charm or wealth. She answered on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep. "Liv, it's 2 a.m. Is the baby okay?" Tears. Olivia had been holding back, finally broke free. In choked sobs, she recounted the entire evening, the words tumbling out in a torrent of fear and fury. Sophie listened without interruption, a grim silence on the other end of the line. "I'm booking the first flight to LaGuardia," Sophie said, the moment she finished, her voice all business. "Pack a bag, just the essentials, passports, documents, any cash you have. You're coming to Boston with me." "No," Olivia said the single word, sharp and clear. The sobbing stopped. "If I just run, he'll paint me as an unstable, hysterical, pregnant woman. He'll freeze my assets. He'll hire private investigators. He will use our child as a pawn. He will destroy me, Soph. I can't just run. I have to burn his kingdom to the ground." There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" Sophie asked, a note of alarm in her voice. "I have a video, Sophie, of the whole thing." The silence on the other end was now one of shock, quickly followed by a dawning understanding. "Oh, Liv, you brilliant, crazy woman. I'm going to leak it," Olivia said, the decision solidifying into something unbreakable. "But I can't just dump it on the internet. That's amateur. It needs to be handled by someone credible, someone he can't buy or intimidate." Her mind was already working, connecting dots from her past life. Before Harrison, her work as a curator had put her in touch with journalists covering the art world, including the high-stakes world of auctions and forgeries. One name stood out: Ben Carter. He wasn't a gossip columnist. He was a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter for the New York Chronicle, known for his meticulous, fact-checked takedowns of powerful, corrupt men. He had once interviewed her for a piece on art repatriation. He had been tough fare and unimpressed by wealth. He was perfect. "I need you to do something for me," Olivia said to her sister. "I'm going to wire you the last of my emergency fund. I need you to find me the most ruthless, terrifying divorce attorney in New York City. A shark. I want her ready to file the second the story breaks." "Consider it done," Sophie replied, her voice filled with a fierce pride. "Be careful, Liv. You're taking on a dragon." "I know," Olivia whispered, looking at the USB drive in her hand. "But I have a weapon he never forged." After ending the call, she composed an email from a new anonymous account. The recipient was Ben Carter's private encrypted address, which he listed on his professional page for sensitive tips. Subject: Evidence of violent domestic abuse by Harrison Croft. Body: Mr. Carter. You don't know me, but we met once years ago for a story. I am in possession of a video file recorded today, July 25th, 2025. The video shows my husband, Harrison Croft, in our New York apartment, committing an act of violent intimidation against me. I am 7 months pregnant. The video is clear and undeniable. I am prepared to provide it to you exclusively on the condition of anonymity until the story is published. This is not about money. This is about my safety and the safety of my child. If you are interested in exposing the truth behind the public facade of a celebrated public figure, I will be at the back corner booth of the Old Town Cafe on 3rd Avenue at 7 a.m. I will be wearing a grey trench coat and reading a copy of Meditations. Come alone. Attached is a 3-second soundless clip from the video. Just so you know, this is real. She attached a short, cropped GIF of Harrison's fist making contact with the wall, a silent, damning piece of evidence. She took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the send button. This was the point of no return. The moment she pressed this, the life she knew, the gilded cage, the suffocating luxury, the silent terror would be over. A new life of uncertainty, public scrutiny, and battle would begin. She thought of her child, of the world she wanted to bring them into. A world where their mother wasn't afraid. She pressed send. The Old Town Cafe was a relic, a small, unassuming diner that had survived decades of gentrification by serving reliably decent coffee and greasy breakfasts. It was the last place anyone would expect to find the wife of a billionaire. At 6:50 a.m., Olivia slipped into the worn vinyl of the back booth. She had dressed down jeans, a simple black sweater, the grey trench coat and a baseball cap pulled low over her face. She placed the copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations on the table and ordered a black coffee she had no intention of drinking. Every nerve in her body was screaming. At precisely 7 a.m., a man entered the cafe. He was older than she remembered, perhaps in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a rumpled coat that suggested he valued function over fashion. It was Ben Carter. His eyes scanned the room instantly, dismissing the few other patrons, and landed on her. He approached the booth with a cautious, deliberate gait. "Mrs. Croft," he asked, his voice a low baritone. He didn't offer a hand, just slid into the opposite side of the booth. "I prefer Olivia Davenport," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He gave a slight nod. "Fair enough. You brought a storm to my inbox this morning, Miss Davenport. Is it a storm you're willing to chase?" "I watched the clip," he said, getting straight to the point. "It's compelling. But a 3-second GIF isn't a story. I need context. I need to see the full video. I need to verify its authenticity. And I need to know why you're doing this. The world will call you a gold digger, a scorned wife out for revenge. You need to be prepared for that." Olivia met his gaze unflinching. "I am prepared to be called worse. What I'm not prepared for is raising my child in a house where rage is normalized and violence is the answer to a disagreement. I'm not doing this for money. I'm doing this for my life." She reached into her bag and slid one of the encrypted USB drives across the table. "This is the full unedited file, time-stamped with metadata intact. My husband's IT security is legendary, but this system is completely independent. It's clean. The full video shows the entire argument, from the discussion about a caterer to the moment he punched the wall and walked away." Ben picked up the drive, examining it. "This could bring down one of the most powerful men in the country. It will have consequences for him, for his company, for you." "I'm counting on it," Olivia said. "My team will need a few hours to verify everything he said, pocketing the drive. If it's what you say it is, we'll run it on the Chronicle's front page, digital first, by noon. Once it's public, my editors will want an exclusive interview, on the record. You'll have it," she agreed, "as soon as I'm in a secure location." Ben Carter stood up. "Stay safe, Miss Davenport." He left as quietly as he had arrived. Olivia remained in the booth for another 10 minutes, her body thrumming with adrenaline. The first chess move had been made. Now she had to prepare for the counterattack. She left the cafe and took a winding, circuitous route through the city-switching subway lines twice before emerging in a completely different neighborhood. There, a black car was waiting. Sophie had come through. The driver simply held up a phone with the name Evelyn Reed on it. Olivia got in. The hours that followed were a blur of calculated action. Evelyn Reed was everything Sophie had promised, a powerhouse in a razor-sharp suit with an office in Midtown that radiated quiet, expensive competence. She listened to Olivia's story with fierce, focused attention, her expression unreadable. When Olivia finished, Evelyn gave a single, sharp nod. "Good," Evelyn said. "The video is your shield and your sword. While Carter's team is verifying, we prepare for war." For the next 3 hours they worked. Evelyn and her team drafted divorce papers, citing irreconcilable differences and a history of controlling behavior and abuse. They prepared a motion for an emergency protective order to be filed the moment the story broke. They initiated proceedings to freeze a portion of the marital assets before Harrison could hide them offshore. Olivia signed document after document, her signature growing bolder with each one. She was no longer just Olivia. She was a plaintiff, a force of legal action. At 11:58 a.m., Olivia was in a hotel suite that Evelyn had secured under a corporate alias. Sophie was there, having landed at LaGuardia and come straight to the hotel. The sisters were sitting in silence, watching the clock, when Sophie's phone buzzed. Then Olivia's. Then they buzzed again and again, an electronic chorus of chaos. It had begun. A push alert from the New York Chronicle app was the first drop in the deluge exclusive tech. Billionaire Harrison Croft, seen in violent outburst against pregnant wife in leaked video. Sophie clicked the link. There it was. The front page of the Chronicle's website was dominated by a still frame from the video. Harrison, his face a mask of fury, his fist inches from a cowering Olivia. Below it, Ben Carter's meticulously detailed article laid out the story, embedding the full, shocking video. The storm had made landfall. Within minutes, Harrison Croft was the #1 trending topic worldwide. The video was everywhere, ripped from the Chronicle site, and shared millions of times a minute across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. News channels broke into their regular programming. Business networks immediately began speculating on the impact on Croft Enterprises' stock. In his gleaming office tower, Harrison Croft was in a board meeting when his right-hand man, a perpetually nervous executive named Gregory, burst into the room, his face pale. He thrust an iPad in front of Harrison. Harrison saw the headline. He saw the picture. He saw the embedded video. He pressed play and watched himself, his private monster displayed for the entire world to see. For a moment he froze, the blood draining from his face. The other board members stared, their expressions a mixture of horror and cold calculation. The Vanguard deal, his legacy, it was all evaporating in real time. His shock quickly morphed into a familiar volcanic rage. He hurled the iPad against the wall where it shattered. "Find her!" he bellowed at Gregory, his voice echoing in the stunned silence of the boardroom. "Find her now, and get me Robert Egan on the phone." Robert Egan was not just a lawyer. He was a crisis management artist, a fixer who made problems and people disappear. While Harrison scrambled to control the inferno, Olivia was giving her on-the-record interview to Ben Carter via a secure video link. With Evelyn Reed by her side, she told her story calmly and articulately. She spoke of the pattern of control, the emotional abuse, the isolation. She explained that she didn't leak the video for fame or money, but because she believed it was the only way to ensure he couldn't silence her. He built a public image of a perfect, benevolent man. she said, her voice clear and strong. I wanted the world to see the man I lived with, the man who punched a wall next to his pregnant wife's head because he didn't like her choice of caterer. That one detail, the caterer, was a masterstroke. It was so petty, so absurd, that it made the violence all the more chilling and believable. It stripped Harrison of any possible justification, painting him not as a man who lost his temper under pressure, but as a pathetic tyrant. As the interview wrapped up, Evelyn's phone rang. It was the process server. He had just served a stunned Harrison Croft with divorce papers and the temporary restraining order in the lobby of his own office building in front of a horde of reporters. The king was cornered in his castle. The walls, the real ones, and the metaphorical ones were closing in. And Olivia, the woman he had tried to reduce to a mere accessory, was holding the hammer. The 24 hours following the leak were a public relations bloodbath for Harrison Croft. His meticulously crafted image was not just tarnished, it was incinerated. Croft Enterprises' stock plummeted by 30% in pre-market trading, wiping out billions in value. The board of directors issued a terse statement announcing that Harrison was taking an indefinite leave of absence and that an internal investigation was underway. It was a corporate execution, swift and brutal. Harrison, however, was not a man who accepted defeat. Barricaded in his penthouse, the hole in the wall now a constant mocking reminder of his hubris, he assembled his war council. At the head of the table was Robert Egan, the crisis manager, a man with a reptilian smile and no discernible conscience. Alongside him sat a team of cutthroat litigators from the city's most feared law firm. The narrative is out of control, Egan stated, pacing in front of the window. Right now, she's Joan of Arc, and you're King Herod. We need to flip that. We need to make her the villain. She has a video of me punching a wall next to her pregnant head. Harrison snarled, pouring himself another scotch. How do you flip that? We don't attack the video. The video is a fact. We attack the person who leaked it. Egan explained, his eyes glinting. We paint Olivia Davenport as a manipulative, unstable gold digger. She knew you were under pressure. She provoked you. She had a hidden camera ready to capture the one moment you snapped. It was a setup, a multi-million-dollar shakedown. The strategy was classic character assassination. Within hours, the counteroffensive began. Anonymous sources close to Harrison Croft began whispering to tabloid journalists and gossip bloggers. Stories began to surface, crafted from half-truths and outright lies. Olivia Davenport had a history of emotional instability. She was unhappy that Croft insisted on a bulletproof prenuptial agreement. Friends say she was obsessed with money and status. Was the pregnancy a trap to secure the Croft fortune? They dug into her past, unearthing a college boyfriend who, when paid a handsome sum, was willing to describe her as dramatic and demanding. They leaked details of her prenuptial agreement, framing her legal challenge as a greedy money grab rather than a fight for a fair settlement. Olivia, watching the smear campaign unfold from the sterile safety of her hotel suite, felt a surge of nausea that had nothing to do with her pregnancy. She had expected it, Evelyn had warned her, but the sheer viciousness of it was breathtaking. Don't read it, Sophie advised, trying to take the tablet from her hands. It's poison. No, Olivia said, her jaw tight. I need to see what they're doing. I need to know the weapons they're using. In their own war room, Evelyn Reed was calm, almost serene. This is predictable, she told Olivia over a conference call. It's the standard playbook for powerful abusers. They are also making a critical mistake. They are underestimating you. Evelyn's strategy was not to engage in the mudslinging. We stay above it. We let the video speak for itself, and we focus on the legal arena. The court of public opinion is fickle. A court of law requires evidence. The first legal skirmish was the hearing for the permanent protective order. Harrison's lawyers argued that the incident was a one-time mistake, an aberration born of immense stress. They portrayed him as a man deeply remorseful for his actions, a man who loved his wife and was desperate to save his family. They submitted sworn affidavits from staff and friends attesting to his gentle nature. Then it was Evelyn's turn. She didn't call Olivia to the stand to be cross-examined and torn apart. Instead, she presented her own evidence. She started by playing the video again, forcing Harrison, who was present via video link, to watch it in front of the judge. But she didn't stop there. This was where Olivia's meticulous, fearful documentation paid off. Evelyn presented a timeline of evidence stretching back over a year. "Your Honor," Evelyn began, her voice crisp and clear. "The defense claims this was a one-time mistake. We have evidence to the contrary." She submitted time-stamped photographs of the laptop Harrison had accidentally broken. An audio recording captured on Olivia's phone of Harrison verbally berating her, calling her worthless and an embarrassment. Emails from Harrison to Olivia's friends, subtly discouraging them from visiting. Financial statements showing how Harrison had systematically closed Olivia's personal credit cards, rerouting all her finances through a joint account that he monitored daily. It was a devastating mosaic of coercive control. The punch was not an isolated act. It was the crescendo of a long campaign of psychological abuse. But the real twist, the move Harrison and his team never saw coming, came from an unexpected quarter. Gregory Harrison's loyal right-hand man had been observing the fallout with growing horror. He had enabled Harrison for years, cleaning up his messes, soothing his ego, and turning a blind eye to his temper. But seeing the video, the cold terror in Olivia's eyes, and then witnessing the brutal campaign to destroy her, it had cracked his conscience. He had a daughter of his own. Panicked by the internal investigation at Croft Enterprises, and terrified of being legally implicated in Harrison's downfall, Gregory made a choice. He contacted Evelyn Reed. He didn't have evidence of more physical abuse. He had something far more damaging to a man like Harrison Croft, evidence of financial crimes. Gregory provided Evelyn with documents proving Harrison had been using the Croft Foundation, the very foundation they were planning the gala for, as a personal slush fund, funneling charitable donations to cover personal expenses and risky private investments. He was laundering money through his own philanthropy. At the next hearing, which was meant to be a preliminary discussion about asset division, Evelyn Reed dropped the bomb. "Your Honor, my client is not just a victim of domestic abuse, but she has also unwittingly been made party to potential federal crimes," Evelyn announced to a stunned courtroom. "We have evidence of significant financial impropriety related to the Croft Foundation, and we will be turning this evidence over to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York." The color drained from the faces of Harrison's lawyers. This changed everything. This was no longer a messy divorce. It was a case of charity fraud, wire fraud, and money laundering. Harrison's personal liberty was now on the line. The legal battlefield had just expanded, and Harrison was now fighting a war on two fronts, with his reputation in tatters and the federal government about to become his new adversary. The smear campaign against Olivia halted abruptly. Robert Egan and his team were now in damage control mode for a much bigger crisis. Harrison Croft, the untouchable titan, was no longer just fighting to save his fortune. He was fighting to stay out of prison. The news of the impending federal investigation was the final fatal blow to Harrison Croft's empire. The board of Croft Enterprises, which had initially placed him on leave, now moved to terminate him entirely, invoking a morality clause in his contract. The man who had built the company from nothing was unceremoniously exiled, his name scrubbed from the corporate letterhead like an embarrassing typo. His one-time allies and sycophants in the worlds of business and society vanished, their loyalty as hollow as his public persona. The invitations stopped. The calls went unreturned. The silence was absolute. For Olivia, the shift was seismic. The narrative which had briefly been twisted against her snapped back with a vengeance. She was no longer just a victim of domestic violence, but a whistleblower who had exposed a corrupt charlatan. The public, which had been fed a diet of lies about her being a gold digger, now saw her as a woman of immense courage. Donations poured into women's shelters in her name. Advocacy groups lauded her bravery. She had weathered the storm. She spent those weeks in a quiet, secluded estate in upstate New York, rented by Evelyn's firm. Sophie stayed with her, a constant, grounding presence. For the first time in years, Olivia felt the suffocating weight of Harrison's control lift. She took long walks in the woods, breathing in the scent of pine and damp earth. She read books not to appear smart, but for the simple joy of it. She ate what she wanted, wore what she wanted, and spoke when she wanted. She was slowly, carefully rebuilding herself. Her pregnancy progressed peacefully. Away from the stress and fear of the penthouse, she felt a profound connection to the child growing inside her. This baby was no longer just a reason to escape. It was her partner in this new life, a future she was fighting for. Meanwhile, Harrison's world was shrinking to the size of a courtroom. His high-powered legal team, now focused on the federal charges, advised him to settle the divorce quickly and quietly. A public, drawn-out fight with Olivia would only provide more ammunition for the prosecutors and further poison any potential jury pool. The settlement negotiation was not a negotiation at all. It was a surrender. Evelyn Reed, armed with the threat of Gregory's testimony and the weight of the federal case, dictated the terms. Olivia would receive a settlement that was far more than the prenup stipulated, not out of greed, but as a matter of principle and security. It included the full transfer of a trust fund for their child, ensuring the baby would never have to depend on Harrison for anything. More importantly, it included Harrison relinquishing all parental rights. He could never see contact or make any claim to their child. It was the ultimate price for his actions. He would lose his legacy, not just in business, but in blood. Faced with the prospect of a lengthy prison sentence, a desperate Harrison agreed to everything. He signed the papers, his signature, a weak scrawl, a ghost of his former arrogant flourish. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a week later. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York held a press conference. Standing before a bank of cameras, he formally announced the indictment of Harrison Croft on multiple counts of wire fraud and money laundering. He specifically credited information provided by concerned citizens for initiating the investigation. Harrison Croft, the man who once graced the cover of Forbes, was now pictured on the front of the New York Post, in a grainy photograph, his face ashen as he walked into a federal courthouse. The visionary had become a common criminal. The story was no longer about a billionaire's marital problems. It was about the complete and utter collapse of a fraudulent empire. A few days after the settlement was finalized, Olivia was sitting on the porch of the upstate house, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. Sophie brought her a cup of decaf tea. "It's over," Sophie said softly. "You did it, Liv. You actually did it." Olivia placed a hand on her belly, where she felt a gentle kick. A small smile touched her lips. "We did it." She thought about the woman she was just a few months ago, trembling on that sofa, feeling small and silenced. It felt like a lifetime ago. She had learned the hardest lesson of her life in that gilded cage, that true power wasn't about money or fame or control over others. It was about controlling your own story. The leak of the video had been an act of desperation, but it had transformed into an act of liberation. It hadn't just exposed Harrison, it had freed her. She had walked through fire and emerged not unscathed but stronger, purer, and finally unequivocally herself. She wasn't Mrs. Harrison Croft anymore. She was Olivia Davenport, a mother-to-be, a survivor, and the architect of her own quiet, beautiful freedom. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a very long time, it was hers to write. 6 months felt like a lifetime. The world that had imploded in a storm of headlines and legal filings had settled into a fragile, quiet peace. Winter had descended upon New England, blanketing the landscape in a soft, sound-dampening layer of snow. Olivia had traded the suffocating luxury of a Park Avenue penthouse for a modest, charming colonial in a quiet suburb of Boston. It was a 5-minute drive from her sister Sophie, a proximity that felt like a fortress wall. Her new life was measured in the rhythms of her daughter Lily. The baby had been born in late autumn, a healthy, beautiful girl with Olivia's dark hair, and to her immense relief, none of Harrison's features. Her world, once filled with galas and hostile takeovers, now revolved around 3 a.m. feedings, the scent of baby powder, and the gummy, unconditional smile of her child. The silence she had once craved was now filled with lullabies and the gentle gurgle of a happy baby. She was healing. Most days she believed it. But trauma leaves echoes. A car door slamming in the street could send a jolt of adrenaline through her. A raised voice in a movie made her flinch. She had nightmares where she was back in the penthouse, the walls closing in a gaping black hole next to her head. Harrison was a ghost who haunted the edges of her newfound peace. He was under house arrest in his empty penthouse, awaiting a federal trial. His communications monitored, his assets frozen. He was a cutted beast. Yet she knew beasts were most dangerous when cornered. The package arrived on a Tuesday. It was a plain brown box with no return address, the label printed in a generic font. Sophie, who was over for lunch, eyed it with suspicion. "Probably another baby gift from some well-wisher," Olivia said, trying to sound casual as she sliced through the tape with a kitchen knife. The public by and large remained on her side. She'd become a reluctant symbol of survival, and gifts from strangers weren't uncommon. But this wasn't a baby blanket or a stuffed animal. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, was a worn, leather-bound book. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. She knew it instantly. It was her father's journal. Her father, a history professor who had died a decade ago, had been a prolific writer. His journals were his most prized possessions. After his death during a chaotic move, several of them had been lost, including this one from his final year. Olivia had mourned its loss for years. She had told Harrison the story once in the early days, in a moment of intimate, trusting vulnerability. He had listened, his expression full of sympathy. She opened the cover. On the inside page, in her father's familiar scrawl, was his name, Professor Alistair Davenport. Tucked beneath it was a small, crisp, new piece of paper. On it, a single typewritten sentence. A legacy is a hard thing to lose, isn't it? The air rushed out of Olivia's lungs. The journal felt suddenly cold, toxic. This wasn't a gift. It was a threat. It was Harrison reaching through the walls of his prison to touch her, to violate the sanctuary of her new life. He was reminding her that he knew her, that he owned pieces of her past, that he could still unearth her most private sorrows and use them as weapons. He was telling her that even though she had taken his future, he still had a hold on her past. Liv. What is it? You're as white as a sheet, Sophie said, rushing to her side. Olivia couldn't speak. She just pointed at the journal at the taunting anonymous note. Sophie read it, and her face hardened. That monster, she whispered, her voice laced with venom. How he's under house arrest. That was the question that screamed in Olivia's mind. She immediately called Evelyn Reed. The lawyer was furious, her voice a whip crack over the phone. This is a flagrant violation of the restraining order's spirit, if not its letter, Evelyn said. It's witness intimidation. It's psychological warfare. I'll get a PI on this immediately. Don't worry, Olivia. We'll find out how he did it. The private investigator, a former NYPD detective named Mike Corrigan, was discreet and efficient. For 2 weeks, Olivia lived on edge, jumping at every shadow. She installed a more advanced security system. She rarely left the house. The ghost had become a palpable presence again, the echoes of her past threatening to drown out the quiet joys of her present. Corrigan's report came via a secure email to Evelyn, who relayed the findings to Olivia and Sophie in a conference call. Harrison has been using his legal counsel visits. Evelyn explained, her tone grim. He's allowed privileged, unmonitored conversations with his defense team. He's been passing coded messages to a junior paralegal on his team, a kid named Leo Batch. Batch then uses burner phones and cash drops to communicate with a network of fixers Harrison still has on his payroll. So he's still pulling the strings, Olivia said, her stomach twisting. It's worse than that, Evelyn continued. The journal was just a message to you, a way to terrorize you. The PI discovered the primary focus of this network. Harrison isn't just trying to spook you, Olivia. He's actively trying to blow up the entire federal case against him. A cold dread settled over Olivia. How Gregory Evelyn said, and Olivia's heart sank. The whistleblower. Gregory is the prosecution's star witness. His testimony about the Croft Foundation fraud is the linchpin of their case. Harrison's people have been systematically dismantling Gregory's life. They got him fired from his new job by anonymously sending his employer falsified documents about his involvement in the scandal. They've had him followed. Last week, his teenage daughter received a text message with a picture of herself walking home from school. There was no threat, just the picture. Just like your journal. It was a message. Sophie swore under her breath. The U.S. Attorney's Office is trying to protect him, Evelyn said. But Gregory is falling apart. He's terrified. Harrison's goal is to intimidate him into recanting his testimony or refusing to cooperate. If Gregory folds, the government's case becomes much weaker. Harrison's lawyers could argue that the evidence was provided by an unreliable witness under duress. It's Harrison's Hail Mary pass to walk free. The room fell silent. Olivia looked from her sister's worried face to the baby monitor where Lily was sleeping peacefully in her crib. She had thought this was over. She believed that by taking Harrison's money and his reputation, she had won. But she was wrong. His freedom was the one thing she hadn't taken, and now he was using it as a weapon to claw his way back. If he succeeded, If he walked out of that courthouse a free man, he would never stop. The packages would never stop. The fear would never stop. He would be a shadow stretching over her and her daughters' entire lives. Her peace, she realized, was entirely conditional. It depended on him being locked away truly and finally powerless. A new kind of resolve, cold and hard as steel, settled in her heart. She had spent months healing, building a quiet life. Now she understood. Hiding wasn't healing. True healing was making sure the monster could never hurt anyone again. "Evelyn." Olivia said, her voice devoid of any tremor. It was the voice of a CEO, not a victim. "When I was married to Harrison, I wasn't just a decorative accessory. I sat in on meetings. I was there for phone calls about the foundation. He used to boast to me late at night about how he'd move money through the charity accounts to fund his passion projects. He called it creative accounting. He thought I was too stupid to understand." She paused, taking a deep breath. He thought I wasn't listening. But I was. I remember dates. I remember project names. I remember numbers. Evelyn was silent for a moment on the other end of the line. Olivia could almost hear the gears turning in her sharp legal mind. "Olivia," she said slowly, "are you saying you can corroborate Gregory's testimony? That you can be a direct witness to the fraud I'm saying? I can be a better witness than Gregory." Olivia corrected her. "Gregory saw the spreadsheets. I heard the confession from the man himself, the U.S. Attorney's office. Would they be interested in a new star witness? They would see it as a gift from God." Evelyn breathed. "But Olivia, this means taking the stand. In open court. His lawyers will try to tear you apart. They will use every lie, every piece of the old smear campaign. They will paint you as a vengeful ex-wife. It will be brutal." Olivia looked over at Lily again, sleeping soundly, blissfully unaware of the darkness her mother was fighting. She had taken the video to protect this child. Now she had to finish the job. She couldn't build a life of peace on a foundation of fear. She had to build it on a foundation of justice. "Let them try." Olivia said, her voice ringing with the clarity of absolute certainty. "They called me a gold digger. They called me unstable. They can call me whatever they want. But when I take that stand and look that jury in the eye, the only thing they're going to call me is credible. Get me the U.S. attorney. In the end, this isn't just a story about a leaked video and the fall of a powerful man. It's a testament to the quiet strength that can be forged in the darkest of places." Olivia Davenport's journey from a terrified wife in a golden prison to a woman who reclaimed her own life serves as a powerful reminder that the truth, when wielded with courage, is the most formidable weapon of all. She didn't just escape her abuser. She dismantled the very source of his power, proving that real strength isn't about how hard you can punch, but about how resiliently you can stand back up. $1 million mansion, a glittering charity gala, and a rumor that shattered her world. These were the moments that changed Veronica Caldwell's life forever. The night she glimpsed her millionaire husband, Arthur Caldwell, in a corner suite with another woman, her heart stopped and her reality came undone. But Veronica wasn't one to wilt under heartbreak. In a blaze of fury and determination, she demanded answers. Within hours, she'd contacted high-profile attorney Lisa Bloom, filed a lawsuit, and sought to freeze Arthur's assets. Little did she know this was only the beginning. betrayal, hidden secrets, and shocking revelations lay just beyond the door. Veronica Caldwell had been raised with modest means in a small Midwest town called Havenwood. When she first met Arthur, it was during a charity event at the luxurious Blackwell Hotel in downtown Chicago, where she had been working as an event organizer. He introduced himself with a gentle smile and impeccable charm, claiming to be a philanthropist looking to support children's healthcare initiatives. Veronica was drawn to his warmth and what appeared to be genuine kindness. Arthur was a man with an understated confidence and a magnetic presence that commanded the room. After weeks of casual dates, mostly at public places like art galleries, fancy brunch spots, and one memorable evening at the Chicago Symphony, Veronica found herself swept into Arthur's extravagant world. Diamonds, fine wines, designer gowns. These were all new to her. Yet, despite the sudden wealth and whirlwind romance, Arthur always seemed open and attentive, making her feel truly seen. But those early days were a stark contrast to what Veronica discovered that fateful evening at the Caldwell mansion. The estate, perched on 10 acres just outside the city, boasted a lush garden, a private lake, and a breathtaking view of the skyline. Arthur often hosted lavish fundraisers there, inviting everyone from local politicians to Hollywood celebrities. At one such event, Veronica, now Mrs. Caldwell for nearly 3 years, noticed her husband had slipped away from the main gathering. When he didn't return, she went searching. She passed the rose garden, circled around the pool house, and eventually found herself outside the upstairs study. A strange giggle echoed through the hallway. With her hand trembling on the doorknob, she peeked inside. There, under the glow of a crystal chandelier, Arthur's arms were intimately wrapped around a woman Veronica had never seen before. Her world cracked in an instant. In that moment, Veronica felt her entire body go numb. She wanted to burst through the door, confront them both, and demand answers. But something stopped her. Instead, she crept backward, heart-hammering tears stinging her eyes, until she found her way back downstairs. She needed to breathe. She needed to think. Throughout the rest of the evening, she maintained her composure with an otherworldly grace she never knew she possessed. She greeted guests, engaged in polite conversation, forced laughter when required. The man she believed was her loving husband eventually reappeared, guiding that same mystery woman around the party, with a dazzling smile on his face. Veronica watched from a distance. Her mind spiraled, replaying his affectionate gaze, the gentle way he pressed a hand to the woman's back. The reality settled in Arthur Caldwell. Her beloved husband was having an affair right there in their home. The next morning, Veronica woke early, exhausted but resolute. She needed clarity, so she confronted Arthur the moment he walked into the breakfast lounge. He greeted her with a casual kiss on the cheek, as if nothing had happened. But Veronica could see the flicker of panic in his eyes when she slid her phone across the marble table, showing him a candid photo she'd managed to snap of him and his companion the night before. Arthur's expression froze, and for a moment his perpetual calm facade cracked. He tried to stammer out an excuse, something about a harmless flirtation, a misunderstanding, the woman being a potential investor. Veronica felt her stomach churn. She might have believed him once, but the way he'd held that stranger was anything but professional. Before Arthur could collect himself, she walked out. The weight of betrayal settled heavily on her shoulders, fueling her next step. Though Veronica had never considered divorce or anything drastic, she wasn't naive. Growing up with a single mother who struggled to make ends meet taught her one thing. Preparation was everything. She had a friend from college, Laura Singletary, who now worked as an associate at a prestigious law firm in Chicago. Veronica left the mansion and sped through winding roads until she reached Laura's office. Tearing up in the reception area, Veronica recounted the entire incident from the moment she caught Arthur in the act to his feeble denials. Laura, always pragmatic and fiercely loyal, recommended they call in a top-tier attorney specializing in complex divorces and asset management. That was when Lisa Bloom's name came up. Realizing how complicated things might get, especially given Arthur's wealth and political connections, Veronica agreed. She wanted the best, and if it meant going toe-to-toe with her husband's empire, so be it. Within hours, Laura had arranged a meeting in Lisa Bloom's chic downtown office. Veronica sat in a plush leather chair, scanning the glossy photos of high-profile clients on the walls, feeling both intimidated and strangely emboldened. Lisa entered with a focused energy, wearing a smart black suit and practical heels. She listened intently as Veronica poured out her story. When Veronica finished, Lisa's eyes narrowed with professional determination. "We have options," she said firmly, detailing the potential legal strategies. Filing for divorce was straightforward. But if Arthur was indeed funneling money or shifting assets around, Veronica needed to act fast to ensure she got her fair share. You'd be surprised, Lisa warned, how many times wealthy spouses try to hide funds overseas or in obscure trusts once they suspect a breakup. Veronica's head swirled, but she knew one thing: she had to protect herself. With a deep breath, she agreed to proceed. On Lisa's advice, they decided to file a petition for divorce and a motion to freeze Arthur's assets immediately. Veronica wasn't out for revenge. At least that's what she told herself. But she'd poured her heart into the marriage, invested her life in supporting Arthur's philanthropic endeavors. She wasn't about to be left with nothing if he decided to vanish half his fortune before the ink on the divorce papers dried. The legal process began with a flurry of phone calls, paperwork, and discreet investigations into Arthur's financial dealings. Veronica felt both liberated and terrified. Each phone call with Lisa or Laura revealed more complexities: shell companies overseas, accounts, business partners who might not be entirely legitimate. She discovered that Arthur was far wealthier than she'd even realized. The sense of betrayal grew deeper. Not only had he been unfaithful, he'd also kept hidden parts of his life from her. The first real confrontation happened just 3 days after she filed. Veronica was alone in the Caldwell mansion, in the very study where she'd caught Arthur cheating. She was packing up some personal belongings when she heard footsteps in the hallway. Arthur appeared, face taut with anger, a crumpled envelope in his hand. "You served me divorce papers," he said, voice shaking with fury. Veronica tried to stand her ground, but fear twisted in her stomach. Arthur looked like a man pushed beyond his limits. "You cheated on me," she responded, her voice surprisingly steady. "There's no going back." Arthur launched into an elaborate denial, trying every angle, blame, begging threats. He claimed her lawsuit was a blatant money grab, accusing her of only wanting his fortune. Veronica's hands trembled, but her resolve remained firm. She walked out, letting his accusations echo unanswered behind her. News of the divorce filing spread through Chicago's high society in a matter of hours. Rumors swirled at country clubs, upscale boutiques, and charity luncheons. Veronica's phone buzzed non-stop with messages from so-called friends and acquaintances. Some offered fake sympathy fishing for juicy details. Others criticized her, whispering that she was a gold digger, trying to ruin poor Arthur Caldwell. Public opinion seemed divided. Arthur had a long-standing reputation as a philanthropic hero. especially for his donations to children's hospitals. Many found it hard to believe he could have engaged in an affair, let alone hidden a labyrinth of assets. Veronica's quiet heartbreak was overshadowed by the scandal of the lawsuit as tabloids and gossip columns exploded with sensational headlines. Millionaire mogul's marriage meltdown, Arthur Caldwell's dirty secrets. Veronica felt exposed, betrayed not just by Arthur, but by the so-called friends who relished in her downfall. In the midst of this media storm, Veronica found unexpected allies. One evening, she received a call from Deborah Knight, a long-time patron of the arts. Deborah and her husband had been close to Arthur and Veronica, but Deborah confessed that she had witnessed odd financial dealings over the years. She'd never said anything before, not wanting to stir the waters. Deborah offered to share what she knew about Arthur's suspicious transactions. Things like off-the-record property deals and shell corporations set up in the Caymans. "I'm not proud of staying silent," Deborah said, "but I'm willing to help if it means stopping him from hurting more people." Veronica felt a surge of gratitude, relieved that she wasn't alone. Perhaps she realized some in their circle were more than superficial partygoers. They were individuals of conscience, willing to support her in this legal and emotional minefield. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team swung into action. They filed a countersuit, claiming Veronica had violated prenuptial agreements Veronica never even remembered signing. Supposedly, these documents limited her claim on his estate and required her to keep certain marital disputes private. Arthur's lawyers accused Veronica of defamation, insisting she had tarnished his public image by speaking to the press. The pressure was immense. Paparazzi camped outside Veronica's new apartment, in a modest downtown building, snapping photos whenever she left to meet Lisa Bloom. Journalists hounded her mother for interviews, digging into every aspect of her past. And swirling amid it all were questions about the mystery woman. Who was she, and what role did she play in Arthur's business? Empire Lisa advised Veronica to keep a low profile. But Veronica realized that the more she tried to hide, the more the tabloids conjured false narratives about her. As depositions and court hearings loomed, Veronica discovered a new layer of deceit. A friend with contacts in city government hinted that Arthur was planning to transfer significant capital to a secret bank account in Switzerland. Furious and frightened, Veronica relayed this information to Lisa. If that transfer happened before the asset freeze took effect, Veronica might lose the financial security she sought, making it nearly impossible to claim what was legally hers. Lisa moved swiftly, filing motions and lobbying the judge for an emergency hearing to freeze Arthur's assets immediately, citing the risk of asset dissipation. It was a bold move and an unprecedented one. In that jurisdiction, usually these matters took months to settle, and judges were reluctant to freeze someone's finances without irrefutable evidence. But the potential for fraud was too great to ignore. The showdown in court was set, and tensions soared to new heights. Standing outside the courthouse with cameras flashing and reporters shouting questions, Veronica felt her heart pounding like a bass drum. She spotted Arthur exiting his black luxury sedan across the street, flanked by his high-powered legal team. He offered the crowd a tight-lipped smile. The hearing room was surprisingly small, adorned with old wood paneling and a single American flag by the judge's bench. Veronica sat beside Lisa Bloom and Laura, her hands trembling beneath the table. Arthur's attorney, a seasoned litigator named Bradley Fisher, exuded confidence as he argued that there was no credible evidence Arthur was hiding assets. But Lisa had prepared meticulously. She presented emails from Deborah Knight referencing suspicious accounts, photographs of Arthur's confidential files, and even a recorded phone conversation provided anonymously that hinted at Arthur's intention to offload millions in real estate. The judge listened intently, scowling as he leafed through the documents. After 2 hours of tense testimony and fervent arguments, the judge leaned forward. He reprimanded Arthur's team for lack of transparency and expressed concern about the possibility of undisclosed financial maneuvers. Mr. Caldwell, the judge, intoned voice, echoing in the silent chamber. The evidence is concerning. Therefore, pending further investigation, I'm granting the motion to temporarily freeze your primary liquid assets. A stunned hush fell over the courtroom. Veronica couldn't breathe. She glanced at Arthur, whose face blanched, eyes flashing with outrage. He whispered something to his attorney before storming out. In the hallway, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions. Though her heart hammered, she kept her statement brief. I have confidence in our judicial system and believe the truth will come out. The cameras captured her every word, broadcasting the image of a determined woman refusing to back down against a powerful millionaire. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment and found an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a letter from an anonymous source typed in neat block letters. It warned her of imminent threats, suggesting that Arthur might retaliate in ways beyond legal maneuvers. She felt her blood turn cold, recalling stories of wealthy tycoons who went to extreme lengths to preserve their fortunes. Terrified, she showed the letter to Lisa Bloom the next morning. Lisa looked alarmed. I'll hire a private security consultant, she said. This might just be a scare tactic, but we can't take any chances. Veronica reluctantly agreed. A small team of security professionals began monitoring her building's entrance, and she was advised to vary her driving routes. She felt like she was living in a crime thriller rather than a divorce dispute. But if Arthur was truly desperate, who knew what he might do next? In an effort to regain some normalcy, Veronica decided to pay a visit to her mother, Marianne Parker, back in Havenwood. She arrived in the sleepy town at dusk, seeking solace in the familiar. The small house with peeling white paint stood as a warm reminder of simpler days. Marianne opened the door with teary eyes and enveloped her daughter in a hug. Inside over cups of mint tea, Veronica confided everything about Arthur's affair, the lawsuit and the mounting threats. Marianne listened quietly. Sadness etched across her face. I always felt there was something too perfect about Arthur, she admitted. You deserved someone honest, someone who didn't hide behind a $1 million smile. Despite the comfort of her mother's presence, Veronica's mind couldn't rest. She knew she couldn't stay in Havenwood for long. Court dates and 1,000 unanswered questions awaited her back in the city. Returning to Chicago, Veronica discovered Arthur had unleashed a new wave of attacks. Publicly, he insisted Veronica was psychologically unstable, citing episodes from her past, a flat-out lie he'd likely fabricated. A swarm of reporters camped outside her apartment, speculating about her mental health. Friends called in confusion. Some even scolded her for dragging Arthur's name through the mud. Lisa Bloom arranged a press conference at her firm's office to set the record straight. Veronica, nerves on edge, stood before a sea of microphones and delivered a measured statement. These allegations are false. I have never been diagnosed with any mental health condition, nor have I experienced episodes. I am simply standing up for my rights. She left immediately afterward, tears brimming. The cruelty of Arthur's campaign to discredit her felt like a second betrayal, compounding the heartbreak she'd already endured from his affair. Yet amidst the chaos, a breakthrough arrived. Laura Singletary had been quietly digging into Arthur's corporate records. Late one evening, she called Veronica, voice trembling with excitement. "I've found something big," she whispered. Arthur's name is tied to shell companies that own multi-million-dollar condos in Dubai, plus a luxury yacht in Monaco, assets he never declared. Veronica's heart pounded. If this was true, it could strengthen her case immeasurably. The existence of hidden foreign properties would prove Arthur's efforts to conceal wealth. Laura promised to pass the information to Lisa Bloom so they could present it at the next hearing. That night, Veronica scarcely slept. Though the revelations were disturbing, they also gave her a spark of hope. Every new piece of evidence chipped away at Arthur's untouchable facade. Perhaps she wasn't fighting an impossible battle after all. Maybe, just maybe, truth would prevail. At the subsequent hearing, Lisa Bloom filed additional motions to freeze all international assets tied to Arthur Caldwell. Predictably, Arthur's team fought back, denying any wrongdoing. Bradley Fisher produced alleged independent audits, claiming no hidden holdings existed. But Lisa seized on Laura's evidence bank statements, property registrations, and even pictures of Arthur cruising on the very yacht he claimed he didn't own. The judge, now wary of Arthur's denials, allowed more time for forensic accountants to comb through the labyrinth of financial documents. He extended the asset freeze, broadening its scope to include any property or account where Arthur Caldwell was a beneficiary. A hush fell over the courtroom as the judge spoke those words. Arthur looked like he'd swallowed glass. Outside, Veronica exhaled a shaky sigh of relief. With each legal victory, she felt the grip of Arthur's power loosening, though she knew the fight was far from over. In the weeks that followed, Veronica wrestled with her emotions. The love she once felt for Arthur lingered like a phantom ache. She couldn't deny that they'd shared good times charity galas, where she felt proud of his generosity, heartfelt moments spent planning a future together, evenings gazing at the lake from their bedroom window. But that Arthur seemed like a distant memory now. The man threatening her in court, undermining her reputation, and brazenly lying about hidden assets was a stranger. She tried to remember when she'd first noticed cracks in their relationship. Maybe it was when he started taking more business trips without explanation, or when he began making grand promises but never followed through. Despite the pain, Veronica steeled herself. This was the path she'd chosen, and she would see it through. She wasn't just fighting for money. She was fighting for her dignity, her self-respect. One afternoon, as Veronica reviewed documents in Lisa's office, a knock at the door startled them both. A young paralegal walked in, looking visibly shaken. "Mr. Caldwell's attorneys just served a subpoena for your personal diaries and journals," she said, handing over a stack of papers. Veronica felt her cheeks burn. She had never kept a detailed diary, but the attempt to pry into her private thoughts was alarming. Lisa read through the subpoena, her expression turning grim. "They're trying to build a narrative that you're emotionally unstable and vindictive," she explained. "We'll file a motion to quash this, but it's a reminder of how far Arthur is willing to go." A wave of indignation washed over Veronica. It wasn't enough for Arthur to cheat and lie. He wanted to scour her most personal moments, all for the sake of destroying her credibility in court. That evening, Veronica retreated to her apartment, bolting the door against the world. She sank onto the couch, hugging a throw pillow, feeling utterly drained. A year ago, her life was filled with optimism, plans for children, philanthropic projects, even the possibility of expanding their charitable foundation. Now she was mired in depositions, asset traces, and vicious public speculation. She closed her eyes, recalling the last words her mother spoke before she left Havenwood Hold. "Onto your truth, Veronica. People can spin lies all they want, but if you don't bend, they can't break you." She repeated those words like a mantra. Finally, summoning her courage, Veronica opened her laptop and typed out a statement of her own. She decided to speak directly to the press, carefully, and with Lisa's oversight, she would reveal the facts as she knew them. No embellishments, just the stark truth of Arthur Caldwell's betrayal. The next morning, Veronica's statement was published in several reputable outlets, including the Chicago Tribune. She wrote plainly about discovering Arthur's affair, about the suspicious financial behavior, and about her desire for a fair divorce settlement. Nothing more, nothing less. She didn't mention the intimidation tactics or the threatening letter. Instead, she let the evidence of hidden assets speak for itself. Almost immediately, social media lit up. To Veronica's relief, a growing number of voices expressed sympathy and support, condemning Arthur's actions. Over time, the narrative shifted slightly. People began to see beyond the tabloid's sensational headlines and question the philanthropic image Arthur had so carefully cultivated. Arthur's PR machine fired back, releasing a glossy interview in which he insisted he was the victim of a vindictive spouse. But for the first time, people seemed less inclined to believe him. As the divorce case neared its most critical stage, Veronica's nights were haunted by nightmares, Arthur towering over her gavel in hand, banishing her to a life of isolation and poverty. She'd wake in a cold sweat, gasping for air, only to find herself alone in her tiny apartment. Yet each day she donned her armor of resolve and faced new legal challenges. She sat through excruciating depositions, endured the scorn of Arthur's attorneys, and battled the relentless swirl of public gossip. Each time, Arthur tried to twist facts or smear her character. Lisa produced evidence that steadily eroded his defenses. Slowly, methodically, the puzzle pieces were coming together. The yacht in Monaco, the condos in Dubai, the secret Swiss account. Veronica could almost see the day she'd stand victorious in court, the day she'd reclaim her life and her pride. Then came an unexpected twist. A woman named Juliana Martinez reached out to Lisa's office claiming to be Arthur's former personal assistant. Nervous and hesitant, she confessed she had direct knowledge of Arthur's illicit dealings. Juliana said she could provide concrete proof emails, bank transfers, phone call recordings. But she was scared. Arthur had once threatened to ruin her career if she ever turned on him. Veronica and Lisa arranged a discreet meeting at a small cafe on the outskirts of the city. Juliana arrived looking over her shoulder as if she expected Arthur to materialize at any moment. She produced a folder stuffed with documents. "He made me sign NDAs," Juliana whispered. "But I can't keep quiet anymore. Not after what he did to you." Flipping through the folder, Veronica's eyes widened at the incriminating details transfers from Arthur's main company to offshore accounts. This could be the smoking gun they needed. The next day, Lisa Bloom filed new motions with this fresh evidence. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, tried to dismiss Juliana's testimony as the ramblings of a disgruntled ex-employee. However, the authenticity of the documents was quickly verified by forensic experts. Suddenly, Arthur found himself cornered. As tensions mounted, rumors circulated that Arthur was considering an out-of-court settlement. He feared a lengthy trial would expose more of his secrets, tarnishing his carefully maintained image beyond repair. Yet Veronica couldn't shake the feeling that he was stalling, waiting for an opportunity to strike back or shift funds one last time. Lisa cautioned Veronica to stay alert. If Arthur decided to settle, it might come with conditions like strict confidentiality clauses. But Veronica was beyond caring about hush money. She wanted accountability. She was determined to stand her ground, no matter how fiercely Arthur fought to maintain control. The court date for the next major hearing arrived under the weight of an overcast sky. Veronica dressed in a simple navy suit, her hair pulled back neatly. As she entered the courthouse, she spotted a throng of reporters again. But she also saw familiar faces, friends like Deborah Knight and Laura Singletree, there to offer moral support. Even her mother was in the crowd, holding Veronica's hand briefly before she stepped into the hearing room. Arthur was already inside, pacing near the defense table. His skin looked pale, and his eyes brimmed with a jittery anger. When proceedings began, Lisa systematically presented the newly obtained documents from Juliana Martinez. The judge examined them, asked questions, listened to both sides. By midday, it was clear the court had seen enough to suspect significant financial impropriety. Arthur's team requested a recess to consult privately. The tension in the room was palpable. During the recess, Arthur surprised everyone by approaching Veronica in the hallway. He held his hands up in a gesture of surrender. "We don't need to fight like this," he said, voice low. "We can work out an arrangement." For a fleeting moment, Veronica glimpsed the Arthur she once knew, the caring philanthropist, the man who'd first swept her off her feet. But she also remembered his betrayal, the lies, the smear campaign, the hidden assets. She met his gaze. "We could have Arthur," she replied, "but you made it impossible." He swallowed hard and reached into his pocket, pulling out a handwritten note. "My settlement offer," he said, thrusting it at her. Veronica took it, scanning the figures. It was a substantial sum, enough to ensure she'd live comfortably for the rest of her life. But it came with a catch, a strict non-disclosure agreement about his affairs. Veronica's heart pounded as she read the terms. She could end this war now. No more court battles. No more invasive questions. No more paparazzi. But she'd have to bury the truth, pretend the affair, and the underhanded asset hiding never happened. She'd be free financially, but gagged morally. When she looked up, Arthur's expression was calm, almost smug. He assumed she would jump at the chance to walk away from the drama. She shook her head slowly, handing back the note. "I can't," she said. "I won't be silenced." Anger flared in his eyes. He snatched the paper and stormed off. Veronica watched him go, shaky but resolute. Perhaps turning down that money was foolish, but she realized something vital. She needed justice, not just a payout. She walked back into the courtroom, prepared for whatever was next. The hearing resumed, and the judge pressed both sides for clarity. Lisa Bloom reiterated the evidence, the affair, the financial duplicity, the intimidation attempts. Bradley Fisher tried to undermine Juliana Martinez's credibility, but each time Lisa countered with another piece of corroborating evidence. Eventually the judge announced his ruling on the temporary measures. The asset freeze would continue and expand to include any account or property discovered during the ongoing investigation. Moreover, the judge suggested that if further wrongdoing was uncovered, Arthur Caldwell could face criminal charges for fraud or perjury. A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Arthur sat rigid, staring straight ahead. Veronica's pulse throbbed in her ears. She knew this was a monumental victory, yet it felt surreal. She'd gone from a naive event organizer to a woman standing on the verge of defeating one of the city's most influential figures. Outside, the press ambushed them again. Arthur rushed past, ignoring the barrage of questions. Veronica stood with Lisa Bloom at her side, delivering a concise statement. "I'm grateful the court has taken steps to protect my rights. The truth is what matters most here." She retreated to a nearby cafe, adrenaline still surging. Laura and Deborah joined her, exchanging hugs and tearful smiles. "You did it," Deborah said softly. "You really stood up to him." But Veronica couldn't bring herself to fully celebrate. The final trial was still ahead, and she knew Arthur wouldn't back down easily. there were still details to unearth more secrets that could emerge. And beyond the legal struggle, she also had to heal personally from the betrayal, from the public scrutiny, from the collapse of the life she once believed was perfect. For now, though, she savored a small taste of triumph. Over the next few weeks, forensic accountants kept uncovering evidence of Arthur's deceptive practices. Each new revelation painted a damning portrait of a man willing to manipulate his philanthropy business ventures and personal relationships to maintain a veneer of respectability. Meanwhile, Arthur's legal team scrambled to discredit sources. They claimed that Juliana Martinez had been bribed, that Deborah Knight bore a personal grudge, that Veronica had orchestrated a grand scheme to frame Arthur. Yet none of these accusations held up under scrutiny. It was a media circus. Talk shows debated the scandal, with some hosts defending Arthur's philanthropic track record, while others condemned his apparent hypocrisy. Late-night comedians even made jokes about hidden yachts and questionable Swiss accounts. Veronica watched it all with a sense of detachment. Her pain was real, but it had become fodder for national entertainment, and she couldn't entirely escape that reality. Amid the legal wrangling, Veronica's personal life stood in shambles. She'd lost friends who sided with Arthur out of fear or loyalty. She avoided major social events, uncertain whether she'd face hostility or pity. The only bright spots were the unwavering support of her mother, Laura Deborah, and a handful of true friends who believed in her. During this time, she rekindled old passions, writing poetry, practicing yoga, volunteering at a local shelter. These small acts gave her a sense of purpose beyond the courtroom drama. She began to realize that she wasn't just fighting against Arthur. She was fighting to rediscover herself, her identity, after years of molding her life around his pursuits. One late evening, she penned a poem about resilience, tears slipping down her cheeks. Maybe she thought this heartbreak would be the crucible that forged a stronger version of herself. As the final trial date approached, Arthur made one last desperate move. His lawyers filed a motion to remove the presiding judge, alleging bias. They produced quotes from prior hearings, claiming the judge had shown a consistent prejudice against Arthur's wealth. The stunt caused a brief delay, but ultimately failed. The appellate court found no grounds for recusal. Yet the maneuver signaled just how far Arthur was willing to go. It fueled Veronica's anxiety, knowing he still had cards to play. She braced herself for the possibility that new damaging information about her might surface, though she couldn't imagine what else Arthur could concoct. And then, in a twist that surprised everyone, the identity of the mystery woman finally surfaced. A tabloid obtained photos of her with Arthur on a private jet. She was identified as Simone Duval, a high-powered consultant known for her ruthless business tactics. The saga deepened. Simone Duval, her name alone carried an aura of intrigue. Rumors about her influence on Arthur's finances spread like wildfire. Some said she was his silent partner, advising him on secret offshore investments. Others claimed she was the mastermind behind his entire operation. Veronica felt a strange mixture of relief and fury. At least now the woman had a name and face, dispelling the painful mystery. But the fact that Simone might have orchestrated Arthur's deceit made her betrayal even more palpable. Word reached Veronica that Simone was preparing to testify on Arthur's behalf, presumably to challenge the narrative around his finances. Lisa, however, wasn't fazed. "If they want to put her on the stand, that could backfire," she remarked. "We have more than enough evidence to contradict anything she says." Still, the thought of facing Simone in court filled Veronica with dread. She braced for yet another confrontation. The morning of the trial's opening arguments arrived in a blur of tension. Veronica had hardly slept the night before. She dressed carefully, choosing a charcoal grey suit and a simple pendant necklace her mother had given her years ago. It felt like armor, an emblem of her roots and the resilience she'd inherited. When she walked into the courtroom, the atmosphere crackled with anticipation. Journalists packed the gallery laptops open and cameras at the ready. Arthur sat at the defense table, stoic Simone Duval by his side, whispering to Bradley Fisher. She wore a power suit in deep burgundy, exuding confidence. Lisa Bloom began her opening statement with measured precision, outlining Arthur's pattern of financial deception, the evidence from Juliana Martinez, and the suspicious timeline of overseas transfers. She ended with a quiet but firm assertion. "This case is about truth and ensuring that my client, Mrs. Caldwell, receives justice." Bradley Fisher responded by painting Arthur as a generous philanthropist, misunderstood and maligned by a vengeful spouse. He lambasted Veronica's aggressive tactics and accused her of orchestrating a smear campaign. Simone Duval nodded in agreement, occasionally whispering suggestions to the defense team. Witness testimonies followed. Deborah Knight took the stand describing the suspicious activity she'd witnessed. Juliana Martinez testified next, her voice trembling, but her story consistent and damning. She detailed how Simone Duval guided Arthur in transferring funds to obscure accounts. She even provided dates and account numbers. The defense tried to poke holes, questioning Juliana's credibility and highlighting her departure from Arthur's employment on strained terms. Yet each jab felt insufficient against the weight of the physical documents she provided. The tension was palpable as the gallery hung on every word, searching for cracks in the narratives. Then it was Simone Duval's turn to take the stand. The courtroom stilled as she stood up, every eye fixed on her striking figure. She wore a sleek burgundy pantsuit and a calm, collected expression, as though the entire proceeding was just another boardroom pitch. With practiced poise, she walked to the witness box and sat folding her hands in her lap. Her voice, when she began, was crisp, authoritative, and free of any trace of guilt. "I am a business consultant," Simone stated. "I was hired by Mr. Caldwell to advise on international expansion strategies. At no point did I assist him in hiding assets or in misleading anyone, including his wife." Lisa Bloom, seated beside Veronica, leaned forward slightly, noting Simone's deliberate choice of words. The air in the room shifted. This wasn't just testimony. It was a performance. Simone continued denying all allegations. She dismissed the email referencing avoiding scrutiny as a misunderstood industry phrase. It referred to competitive market analysis, she claimed. Nothing to do with the divorce. Veronica sat motionless, eyes locked on Simone. Every denial felt like a slap. This was the woman who'd stood in their home, whispered in Arthur's ear, guided him through the maze of deceit. The audacity of her confident denials made Veronica's stomach churn. Lisa approached the podium for cross-examination. "Ms. Duval, let's go over the timeline," she began. Tone calm, but sharp. "You were in frequent communication with Mr. Caldwell in the weeks leading up to his wife's discovery of hidden assets." "Correct. Yes," Simone said. "We were working on a new investment vehicle in the Middle East." Lisa clicked her remote, and the courtroom screen flickered to life, displaying a series of emails, many of them between Simone and Arthur. The subject lines were technical, but one stood out: urgent trust structuring to shield holdings. "Care to explain this one?" Lisa asked. Simone shifted. It was a legal conversation around forming a trust to protect business interests. "Standard." Lisa's voice sharpened. "Standard? Then why does this email, dated 1 week after Mrs. Caldwell confronted her husband?" Mention the need to reroute investments before the asset freeze request goes through. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Simone blinked rapidly, her composure visibly cracking for the first time. "I can't speak to Arthur's intentions," she said. "I just followed instructions. I wasn't aware of any legal filings." Lisa pressed further, presenting internal memos that included Simone's annotations, some even in her handwriting. One clearly read, "Move fast, no paper trail." Simone stammered. "These could have been misinterpreted," Lisa interrupted. "You're under oath, Ms. Duval." Silence hung heavy in the air. Simone's fingers tapped nervously on the wooden edge of the stand. Her earlier confidence dissolved into a growing unease. From her seat, Veronica saw the shift in the jury's expressions. Doubt had crept in. They were no longer seeing a sophisticated consultant. They were seeing someone implicated, someone with too much access, too much knowledge, and too many reasons to lie. Lisa concluded her cross with a piercing statement. "Ms. Duval, you didn't just consult, you conspired, and the evidence shows it." The judge called for a brief recess, allowing the courtroom to breathe. Simone stepped down, face pale, lips tightly pressed. Arthur avoided her gaze. Back at their table, Lisa turned to Veronica. "She's rattled, and that helps us. A lot." Veronica exhaled slowly, her heart pounding. For weeks, she had feared Simone's testimony would destroy her case. But now the cracks in Simone's mask were visible to everyone. The woman who had once operated from the shadows now found herself under the harshest light, and she was beginning to crumble. As the courtroom doors closed behind Simone, Veronica felt a subtle shift in momentum. The tide was turning. Truth, after months of suffocation, was finally clawing its way to the surface. The trial pressed on like a war of attrition. Every day in court felt like a battlefield. And on the final day of witness testimony, the atmosphere was charged with unspoken anticipation. Arthur Caldwell was called to the stand. He adjusted his tie with a measured calm, walking slowly to the witness box as cameras outside continued flashing through the courthouse windows. Dressed in a tailored gray suit, he wore the same carefully constructed expression of dignity he had worn at every gala and photo op for years. As he took the oath, his gaze drifted briefly toward Veronica. She didn't flinch. She'd spent months preparing for this moment. Arthur's attorney, Bradley Fisher, began the direct examination. His tone was sympathetic, almost theatrical. "Mr. Caldwell," he asked, "can you explain your business dealings that have been so harshly scrutinized in recent weeks?" Arthur spoke with the calculated grace of a politician. "I run a multifaceted business empire. It involves us in multiple countries, countless accounts, and teams of advisors. I never intended to hide anything from anyone, least of all my wife." He sighed dramatically. "If there were errors, they were administrative, not malicious. I trusted consultants like Simone Duval to handle financial logistics. I regret not monitoring everything more closely." To the untrained ear, he sounded credible, even remorseful. But Veronica saw the familiar flicker in his eyes, manipulation wrapped in polished charm. Then came the moment everyone had been waiting for. Lisa Bloom stood, her legal pad in hand, and walked toward the witness box. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, "do you deny threatening Juliana Martinez with professional retaliation if she exposed your financial arrangements?" Arthur stiffened. "Absolutely. I never threatened anyone." Lisa nodded, flipping through documents. "So this voicemail." She clicked a button on her laptop. "Isn't your voice." The courtroom filled with Arthur's unmistakable tone, harsh and low. "You don't want to make enemies out of people who pay your salary." Think about your future." Gasps broke out. Arthur's face turned a shade paler. "That was taken out of context," he stammered. Lisa didn't blink. Was this also taken out of context? She held up a printout of an email chain between Arthur and Simone discussing offshore accounts. One line from Arthur read, "Move the money before she gets the courts involved." Arthur hesitated again. "I was referring to a business restructuring, not hiding funds from my wife." Lisa tilted her head. "And the timing one day, after Mrs. Caldwell confronted you about your affair. That's coincidence." The pressure mounted with every question. Arthur began to unravel, not dramatically, but in subtle, telling ways. He blinked more often. His answers came slower. He glanced toward Simone for reassurance, but she kept her eyes locked on the table. Lisa's final question silenced the room. "Mr. Caldwell, you've portrayed yourself as a victim of media attacks of betrayal by employees, even of your wife. But isn't the truth far simpler? You cheated. You lied. You hid millions. And now you're trying to rewrite the narrative because you got caught." Arthur's mouth opened, then closed. The room waited, but no defense came, not even from Bradley Fisher, who quietly shuffled his notes. As Lisa returned to her seat, she whispered to Veronica, "We just tipped the scale." Closing arguments followed swiftly. Lisa spoke with quiet confidence, weaving a clear and damning story from the months of evidence and testimony. "This is not about bitterness," she said. "It's about betrayal, about truth, about accountability." Bradley tried one last time to recast Arthur as a flawed but generous man. He invoked Arthur's charity work, his reputation, and even his emotional turmoil. But the energy in the room had shifted. Outside, reporters lined the courthouse steps. Arthur exited first, walking briskly past flashing cameras, face tight. Simone trailed behind him, stone-faced and silent. Veronica emerged moments later, flanked by Lisa and Laura. She didn't speak to reporters that day. She didn't have to, because by now, the world had started to see through Arthur Caldwell, and it was Veronica's truth they believed. The courtroom buzzed with low murmurs as everyone waited for the judge to return with his written decision. The tension in the air felt as thick as fog. Veronica sat in the front row, flanked by Lisa Bloom and Laura Singletary. Her hands were cold, despite the warmth of the courtroom clenched tightly in her lap. Across the room, Arthur sat rigid, jaw-clenched, Simone Duval by his side. Their polished exterior remained intact, but Veronica could see the stiffness in Arthur's movements, the subtle tells of a man expecting defeat. Rain trickled down the tall courtroom windows as the judge finally entered. The room fell into silence, broken only by the shuffling of papers and the occasional cough. The judge adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began to read from a printed sheet. After reviewing the substantial volume of evidence, including financial documents, email communications, testimony from key witnesses and cross-examinations presented by both parties, this court finds that Mr. Arthur Caldwell willfully concealed marital assets in an effort to deprive Mrs. Veronica Caldwell of her lawful share in divorce proceedings. A quiet gasp escaped from somewhere in the gallery. Veronica inhaled sharply, eyes locked on the judge as he continued. Furthermore, the court acknowledges a pattern of coercion, intimidation, and manipulation directed at Mrs. Caldwell and at third-party witnesses. These actions are incompatible with the obligations of good faith expected in legal proceedings. The judge paused, glanced over his reading glasses at Arthur, then continued. Accordingly, the court grants Mrs. Caldwell a divorce under terms favorable to her. She shall be awarded a comprehensive settlement that includes ownership of the couple's Chicago estate, a significant share of Mr. Caldwell's disclosed and undisclosed assets, as verified by forensic investigation, and continued protection under the asset freeze until all hidden accounts are accounted for. Arthur's eyes narrowed, lips pressed into a bitter line. Simone looked stunned, her face pale. The judge wasn't done. In addition, he said firmly, "This court is forwarding evidence of potential financial fraud and perjury to the state attorney's office for further investigation." That final sentence landed like a bomb. A ripple of shock spread across the room. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Arthur's posture collapsed ever so slightly, the image of power slipping away in real time. Veronica sat frozen, overwhelmed by a whirlwind of emotions. Relief, justice, vindication, and a strange, sudden weightlessness. After everything, the betrayal, the threats, the humiliations, she had won. Lisa leaned toward her and whispered, "We did it. And he's not just exposed, he's vulnerable." The judge concluded the hearing with a nod and a stern reminder for both parties to comply with post-trial reporting. Then he stood and left robe flowing behind him. As the room stirred to life, Arthur rose, muttering something to his attorney. He refused to look at Veronica. Simone followed him out like a shadow, no longer whispering instructions, no longer in control. Veronica remained seated a moment longer, soaking it all in. The cameras were already swarming outside, and she knew the questions would come. But this moment, this one right here, was hers. When she finally stood, Lisa and Laura embraced her tightly. "I feel like I can breathe again," Veronica whispered, tears brimming in her eyes. Outside, the sky was still grey, but to her it looked brighter than it had in months. Reporters surged toward her, mics outstretched, but this time Veronica faced them without fear. She spoke clearly, calmly. "I'm grateful the court recognized the truth. This was never about vengeance. It was about justice, about refusing to be silenced." She didn't need to say more. Her poise, her strength, and the verdict said it all. That night, Veronica returned to her apartment, set down her keys, and looked out over the city lights. For the first time in a long while, she felt free. Not because she'd defeated Arthur, but because she'd reclaimed herself, her name, her story, her future. And this time, it belonged to her alone. Veronica's breath caught in her throat. She felt tears welling as relief, vindication, and overwhelming emotion washed over her. She turned to Lisa and Laura, embracing them, scarcely believing it was over. Arthur's face was a dark mask of fury. Simone stared straight ahead, jaw clenched. Outside, reporters bombarded Veronica with questions, but for the first time she felt at peace facing their cameras. She spoke clearly. "I'm grateful to the court for recognizing the truth. This wasn't about revenge, it was about fairness and dignity." That evening, in the quiet of her apartment, Veronica allowed herself a moment to weep for the marriage she had lost, for the illusions that had shattered. Yet she also felt a new sense of freedom blossoming within her. A chapter of her life had closed, and though scarred, she emerged standing tall. In the end, Veronica Caldwell found more than just a legal victory. She reclaimed her voice, her identity, and her future. The court's ruling froze Arthur's elaborate web of secret holdings, forcing him to face the consequences of his betrayal. Though she lost friends and endured public scrutiny, Veronica discovered a newfound strength within herself. No longer defined by her husband's wealth or reputation, she stepped forward into a life shaped by her own choices. If this story captivated you, please like, share and subscribe to our channel, so you won't miss more true-to-life drama and inspiring tales of resilience. Every click you make helps us continue bringing you stories of triumph, heartbreak, and the unyielding power of the human spirit. Join our community, share your thoughts in the comments, and stay tuned. More riveting narratives are just around the corner.